What's going on, everybody? I'm about to go ahead and do a very quick hangout. This is not going to be long at all. So let's go ahead and get this started. So there's one thing that I want to do before we begin. This hangout is basically inspired by a new group that's up and coming, I see. They're based out of the Ohio area, and it's basically about something called I Am Israel 12. Now, if you look on their website, they have a series called Brainwash, and it is by, one of the teachers is, this lovely young woman right here. If you go ahead and look on their YouTube channel, you can see that they don't have anything no less than from 6 months ago, and that's pretty much about it. Uh, Also, what you also notice is that there's one thing that's missing on here. Do you see this title right here? This title right here seems not to be here. Oh wait, yes it is. It is right here. I'm sorry. So yeah, one of their lessons that they have here is the truth about marriage. It's taught by this lovely young woman right here. Um, a lot of times people end up swept up into interesting doctrines, and these are the things that they teach. After listening to the video, I decided to do a video response because this is something that I'm always hearing, but I never really address. So without further ado, I'm gonna go ahead and address this. Does sex equal marriage? Let's basically see what the Bible says, and also try to address some of their objections to these things. First off, I like to go ahead and look at a few of the passages that people like to use to say that, hey, there are people that have sex and therefore they're married. These are the two passages. There are Deuteronomy 22 and Exodus 22. What you'll notice is Old Covenant law says a man who has sex with an unmarried woman has to marry her. That would basically, that would be unnecessary if having sex made them married. Why do I say that? Well, let's just go and read the passage. If a man meets a virgin who is not betrothed, now time out. Why is the word betrothed there? There should be no extra steps in this process if all that makes you married is the consummation. But yet this word is here. And seizes her and lies with her. We all know what that means. And they are found. Then the man who lay with her shall give her to the father of the young woman 50 shekels of silver, and he shall be his wife. Why? Because he has what? Had sex with her? No, because he has violated her. Oh, so there's different ways of having sex. He may not divorce her all his days. So notice that after you do this thing, there are all of these other steps that have to take place before someone becomes your wife. If that was not the case, then there would all these extra steps wouldn't be necessary. It would be like, hey, you know what? She's a wife now. It's like, no, 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 no. Before she's a wife, we have to go through these steps. Notice the verse says, and she shall become his wife after all that. You can't leave those parts out. Therefore, sex is not what makes you married. Sex alone is not what makes you married. Look at Exodus 22. It says this. If a man seduces a virgin, right, tempts her, who is not betrothed, once again, there's that word again. Why is that word there if sex alone makes you married? Such a traditional word should not be there. That status should not be present. And lies with her, he shall give her the bride price. Whoa, the bride price. Yes, in other words, some kind of a dowry for her and make her his wife. Well, wait a minute. I thought, the act alone already did that. So why are these extra steps being added to it and then resulting in the woman being a wife if sex makes her the wife? Look at what it says. It says, if her father utterly refuses to give her to him, he shall pay money equal to the bride price were virgins. What does the Father have to say? I thought if a man and woman come together, that's it. So why in the world, once again, here's another traditional step in this whole process of a man and woman coming together. Now the Father's involved. You see all these steps? It's more than just, oh, we have sex and then that's it. No. And this leads into my final slide. So I want you to keep this in mind. So anyway, to look together, these passages clearly state that if a man has sex with a woman, with a virgin who is not betrothed, regardless of whether or not it was, rape or consensual, he is obliged to marry her. He would not sought her, or he should have sought her father's permission first, negotiated the bride price, and then taken her as his wife. But because he didn't do all those steps, he's punished for this. So he now must pay up. He can't opt out anymore and marry her, which could be a major punishment in itself if this was a foolish, spur of the moment act and she really wasn't the right woman for him. This is why people avoid to acknowledge the difference between what a wife is and what a concubine is in biblical times. So since a marriage ceremony is never officially described in the Bible, what qualities would make a concubine different than a wife? Those are two different labels. So is it just suggesting the social status of the difference? I mean, look at it. You have a handmaid, for example. Even if she took up a permanent residence with one man, she would never be a wife, but only a concubine. So look at this. You have 4 women. Bilhah and Zilpah are described as Jacob's concubines, and Rachel and Leah are described as wives, despite them all having sex. Although the children are all equal, right, from the 4 women, since they're all become the 12 tribes. Well, Rachel and Leah's handmaids were never wives, despite having sex and children and raising a family. That's an issue. And the Bible's clear with this stuff. But when you are, as they would say in their promo, brainwashed, then you tend to miss this kind of common sense in your face kind of thing. It just goes right over you. Here's another one. Tamar had sex with Judah because he won't consent to give her to his son in marriage, mainly because he was really young. So he's like, wait for him to get older. After they had sex, there is no thought that they were married, right? Judah relents and allows Tamar to marry his son. Look at Genesis 38, where this whole thing comes from. Look at verse 24 and 26. Verse 24 says, and it came to pass about 3 months after that it was told Judah, saying, Tamar, thy daughter-in-law, has played what? The wife? No, the harlot. Harlots have sex. Wives have sex. Why do they have different titles? And also, behold, she is with child by what? By sex? No, by whoredom. Why is there a difference between just regular sex and whoredom? Why is that there if sex makes you married? And Judah said, bring her forth. What? And let her be what? My bride? No, let her be burnt. Look at verse 26. And Judah acknowledged them and said, she hath been more righteous than I, because that I gave her not to Shelah my son. And he knew her again no more. He's saying that she's been more righteous than me because I should have basically given her my son, but I chose not to do that. And, that was kind of wrong. I should have just go ahead and gave her my son instead of making her wait so long. But notice that, she was never considered his wife, despite them being with child and all that. She never was considered his wife, even though they had sex and had a child. She's described as committing whoredom or playing the harlot, but never a wife. Why is that? I thought sex made you married. Here's number 3 with David. Now, David had sex with Bathsheba and then later marries her, which would be unnecessary if sex made them married. I mean, look at 2 Samuel chapter 11, verse 15. This is what it says. Then Nathan departed to his house, the death of David's son, and the Lord struck the child with, oh boy. Okay, sorry about that. Then the Lord struck the child that Uriah's wife bore unto David. Now, time out. Why is Uriah still considered having Bathsheba as his wife if he's long dead? And it came to pass that, and he became ill. The child became ill. David therefore pleaded with God for the child, and David fasted and went in and lay all night on the ground. Now look at verse 24. Then David comforted Bathsheba, his wife. So you mean to tell me within that 9 months, now all of a sudden in that process, somewhere in between there, now David, has her as a wife, right? And you mean to tell me nothing ceremonial went on between that time? Let's continue. And went in to her and lay with her. So she bore a son, and he called his name Solomon. So time out. He comforted his wife, then he went in unto her. That sounds like sex came after, the title. All right. Here's another one. Look at Genesis 34. You have Shechem. He has sexual relations with Dinah. And then after doing this, says he wants to marry her. Now, this is in Genesis. And Dinah, the daughter of Leah, which bare him unto Jacob, went out to see the daughters of the land. And when Shechem, the son of Hamor, the Hivite, prince of the country, saw her, he took her and lay with her and defiled her. Now, wait a minute. Like, I just thought they were having sex. Why are these different degrees of sex going on if sex equals marriage? I thought I thought that was it. It seems like there's more things going into this. Seems like there has to be some type of consent going on, some agreement, almost some kind of like agreement of covenant. Sounds like if one disagrees and the other agrees, you have this word defilement jumping in there. And his soul clave unto Dinah, the daughter of Jacob, and he loved the damsel, and he spake kindly unto the damsel. And Shechem spake unto his father Hamor, saying, Get me this damsel to wife. Wait, you've already had sex with her. Why are you asking her to be your wife if having sex makes you, her husband? It doesn't make sense. This is in Genesis 34. Look at Genesis 2. Says a man will leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife. So marriage is more than just sex. It's actually, long-term commitment. That was the context of that phrase. Look at Matthew 19. Jesus says that divorce is allowed only in very limited circumstances, like adultery or fornication. So marriage is a lifetime commitment. It's there in the context of those phrases. That's the meaning of it. So if sex makes you married, how do concubines fit into the context of long-term permanent commitment if you have temporary concubine girlfriends? If sex makes you married, concubine statuses should not even exist in the Bible, but they do. Look at Genesis 4. Now Adam knew his wife, and she conceived and bore Cain, and and said, I have acquired a man from the Lord. How is Eve already Adam's wife before this act of knowing? Look, Adam knew his wife Eve. So he knew his wife. But yet this is like, this is the first time that they're having sex. And in Genesis chapter 2, Eve is even called Adam's wife, yet no sex was involved until, chapter 4. That's an issue. So the major story for sex equals marriage proponents is, this one right here in Genesis chapter 24. You have Isaac brought Rebekah into his tent, and she became his wife. So in their case, marriage is initiated between a couple when they engage in sex. Afterwards, they're understood as being bound to each other and thus living in marriage. Now, it sounds, like a good, clear case, doesn't it? Well, but that's not the only thing that happened. You have to remember that Abraham, he went to his servant. He sent his servant, to look for a wife for his son Isaac in verse 5. And it made him swear that he would go and find a wife, but not take his son there. That's verse 8 and 9. So you can already see that there's some type of traditional process going on. It's not just wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. Here's the sex, we're married. No, there's steps. Therefore, Abraham had to make something known to his servant, And this servant to the girl, while near a well with lots of people around, and this girl and servant to her relatives had made known to them. And after that, her relatives blessed her before she left away. Now, ain't that something? And then Rebekah accepted and went all the way back to Abraham and Isaac's homestead to meet his groom. This is all Genesis 24. So here's another one. Oh, by the way, I just did want to say that look at everything that happened there before they went into the tent and did what they did. All those steps had to take place. That's consistent with Deuteronomy and Exodus. When the Lord began to speak by Hosea, the Lord said to Hosea, go take yourself a wife of harlotry. Wow, they're in the same sentence. And children of harlotry, for the land has committed great harlotry by departing from the Lord. So Hosea was commanded by God to marry a prostitute. Yet, this harlot is only acknowledged in having one husband, despite her being with many men. Now let's go to the New Testament. Look how the New Testament makes this thing even worse. And this is the reason why when you look in the videos, a lot of time, they spend a lot of time in the Old Testament and very little in the New Testament. Why? Because they know within the new covenant that you go under, it is not preached that sex equals marriage. Matter of fact, it's delineated, it's divided. There's something that where sex is sinful, and there's something where sex is not sinful. Look at this. Marriage is honorable among all, and the bed undefiled. But fornicators and adulterers God will judge. So the only way that the bed is defiled is people who fornicate and people who commit adultery. Fornicators are people who have sex outside of marriage. If that's what basically that is, if fornication is a reality, especially in the new covenant, which we are in, especially when you enter into Christ, then that means the sex alone does not make you married, because of these words like fornicator and adulterer. Think about it. Adulterer, that means you have sex with someone other than your wife. If sex makes you, you're a husband of somebody, then adultery should be impossible logically. So fornicators and adulterers defiled the bed because their sexual consummation defiled the bed. Therefore, sex does not make one married. Look at the new covenant on sex. These are all the scriptures that I had very little time to pretty much dig up. But I advise you, please just look it up for yourself. Especially Jude chapter 1, verse 7. Now here's one, that I basically picked out. 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 2, it says, but since there is so much immorality, each man should have his own wife and each woman her own husband. Notice that there's no polygamy here at all. And notice that immorality is in context of sex with people who are not your wife, who are not your husband, who is not your wife, who is not your husband. That is the context of immorality in this verse. Right? Immorality, sin. So what does make one married? Well, look at Malachi. Yet you say, for what reason? Because the Lord has been witness between you and the wife of your youth, with whom you have dealt treacherously. Yet she is your companion and your wife by what? Sex? No, covenant. And we all know what covenant is. When you see that word, you know that covenant is a deep word, and that word has a lot to do with, agreements. A covenant is a solemn agreement between two parties. The Bible is clear that a marriage is formed by the covenant between a man and a woman. It's something that they both agree on before God and say, hey, this is what we pledge to do. And there's all kind of rituals that surround the act of covenant. You can look at Abraham, for example. I don't even got to go into anything, right? And you cannot say that that covenant is sex, because there's a whole bunch of other things that go into it that actually make you a wife or a husband. I've already shown you the verses. Also, there must have been some kind of betrothal in, Joel 1:8. Any allusion to it is made by the statement, quote, mourn like a virgin in sackcloth, grieving for the betrothed of her youth. Betrothed again. There should not be this extra step before you're a wife. It should just be sex. There was some type of dowry price in Genesis 34, remember? And also that I doubt that, concubines' parents would, get being that they were often slaves and plunder of war. The bride would wear special clothes for ceremony. With Jeremiah chapter 2. You can look that up. And be accompanied by bridesmaids in Psalm 45. Possibly a wedding feast, that was typical in Genesis 29. And there seems to have been, I guess, some kind of ritual leading to the act of sex where a woman is brought to the man for the purpose of consummating their intentions, as in Genesis 29 again. So there was also some type of, strange practice about, proof of virginity based on the assumption that a virgin will bleed during her first time. And that was in Genesis 22. All these things sit in our Bible, and we could ignore them all we want. But the fact is, they're there, and they have a context, and they have a meaning from those contexts, not a meaning from what we try to say what they mean, or if we ignore them altogether. Email me at ssoreal@gmail.com. You are so much more worth it than sex. It should be more than that makes you married.